the microphone, right? Because I know in the last session, no one in the back could hear the people asking questions, so maybe,
Oh, we'll be loud.
okay.
Brandon, you want to hand them
But
your
there is
mic?
a mic, there is a mic back there.
Dave's loud enough. What's your question, Dave?
So going back to the previous workflow slide, just curious what the relationship between the CFE and the Da Vinci product might be, and what the roadmap for that is, if it's.
So what that might be, I'll let the biz.
Actually, you can clarify both these things. You said that the CFE is kind of like a CDL on steroids. So besides the, the 10 values that a CDL has, what are you able to have with CFE?
Let me just make one real quick point. I think that is a very, very good question there. A CDL describes the mathematical transforms, but to assure that we've really defined a look, we have to know what's coming in and what's going out, what we're seeing it on, and etc. So that's what this does. It describes a look. It has CDL values in it. It also has a library of looks that you can mix and match to, which would maybe be like, well, we've designed a show lot. Well, this has a whole library full of classic film stocks, all sorts of different looks. You can design that, but it's a virtual look. It isn't specific to a single type of camera. It is not specific to a single display. You can look at that look in Rec. 709, you can look at it in P3, and it's going to look the same. You can look at it in lower dynamic range and in a higher dynamic range, and it's going to look the same. The higher dynamic range is going to have more information in the highlights. That's going to be the main difference, but the ballpark look's going to be there. So that's what this does. So say for example, you've set the look up on a Rec. 709 monitor. Now we go to a P3 projector. You put it in there. The transform automatically has been set for, on the first one you set it for Rec. 709 coming out, and then when we go into, for driving the P3 projector, just the ODT or the output transform changes, and the picture looks the same. Guess what? And then if we have a higher dynamic range display, we still see the same picture, except that we have more in the highlights. We can see more detail in the highlights, which is what high dynamic range gives us. So.
And it's a human readable JSON formatted text file.
So it has all the traditional things.
And so back to Resolve.
Back to Resolve,
Yes,
I will let Bruno answer that
So,
one.
so at CineEmerge, we've introduced our OpenFX plugin that loads it to Resolve. So it's in beta, and people are invited to talk to us and test it. So it's a GPU, OpenFX plugin. Any people that supports OpenFX could load the plugin and load the CFE and recreate the same look and finishing as you were, inside of dailies or on set with Tyler.
Yeah, and if we go into a season 2, where if we were to change to this workflow, the value that you were talking about, what we're asking what Brian and I, how that might have been changing, how we were lighting or what we wanted to do with the show, there came a time where we didn't really enjoy the show LUT for certain aspects and parts of the storyline. And we wanted to go further than what those zeros and ones of the CDL, the 10 value points that we can change. We wanted to take it a step past that. We wanted to show the colorist even further what we wanted to intend with the image, but we were limited to that CDL and that show LUT. Where the CFE, I think, would bring the value for season 2 is we can manipulate that look and be able to set it up for that scene or that part of the show, and being able to jump back to what maybe.
It's a virtual.
I think
virtual
show LUT
look.
should die. You should never use show.
I absolutely agree.
I should die.
Any other questions?
I have a question. So you were saying that the CFE will standardize pretty much the look without, disregarding where it's coming from, or what source it's coming from, right? So
That's part of the engine. I mean, the look describes the look, and then the engine takes care of doing the transforms on the end, making, normalizing everything coming in, as well as on going out on the output side, normalizing for the display. So it's sort of the concept of a virtual look, and then.
correct. So ideally, at some point, we don't even have to monitor SDR, because if the HDR is
Yeah, but I think there are certain things from a storytelling point. Yeah. You're going to want to see both because when you're watching,
You can't afford it, that's why. You
the
can't afford it?
well, that's another story, the price. But just aesthetically, you want to be able to still tell the story where you don't have as much detail in the highlights. That still tells the story because people are going to be watching that. And then in the HDR, you want to make sure that you're still telling the story properly with this added benefit. In other words, that is not, I've seen a lot of bad HDR, to tell you this, and a lot of mistakes made, and some done because they don't have a good workflow. Others, you just see, wow, we need to tend to these things. I mean, like burnt out, things, highlights outside where the burnt out clouds all of a sudden look really, really bothersome, where in SDR, they're not. So these are things that we need to, pay attention to. So yeah, it's really good to look at them both. And what we agree upon, what HDR brightness level is, well, our current set of displays are, pretty much at 1,000 nits. So we can say, well, we're going to work in that, within that window or that palette. And we sort of called SDR 100 nits, so we work in that as previewing, although no one watches, that's a whole separate story that we master for 100 nits in a dim surround world, and people may look at it in a different room. There are, in fact, in FSDR controls where you can override that for, well, let's put a compensation in for viewing it in a brighter environment or in a darker environment, like in a Dolby Cinema. There's not that much more, there's only twice the light on the top end, but the bottom end goes all the way down, so it's called dynamic range. It's not dependent upon brightness, it's dependent upon the range. And so all these things are available that you can adjust in there.
Any other questions? Hey, Paul.
It's a kind of a comment, really. In my experience of recent camera test activities, I agree with all the color managed pipelines and all that kind of stuff, and a good IDT will reverse most of the camera, but you can't just say that an IDT will reverse all the effects of the cameras. There's other intangible things that happen when somebody's maybe choosing between like a Venice and an Alexa or something, and the noise performance or how it handles, particularly highlights, and how it handles very, very dark scenes and things.
Yeah, well, dynamic range certainly varies. I think you're right, Paul, and that's in terms of color, that some cameras will capture more. Some will produce some distortions and artifacts that are not related to just color mapping, that there are things that go on. The other thing that can differentiate cameras is spatial type of things. Some experience in the optical path more flare, where you get cross-contamination. So there's a number of things. So when I say, yeah, they don't really have a look, that's really in terms of, well, this color will once you do it, will reproduce the same, but there will be some subtle differences because of optical differences. And then certainly you can take some cameras outside and shoot the clouds, and you're really going to have to be careful, or you just shouldn't do it. And other cameras are going to do that really well because of the dynamic range. And then likewise in low lights, some cameras will have a lot more stuff going on, and those most certainly will influence your opinion of the look. So yes, I mean, that aside, but so really the best thing to do is you have to consider budget when you choose a camera. You have to consider the size of the camera, the availability of the camera, and but the basic thing is choose a camera that fits all your things, that can capture the widest range with the least amount of noise. I mean, those are some of the things. And also that it has sufficient pixels. I mean, a camera that captures, that has more pixels, perhaps looks smoother on images, especially skin tones and things can look incredibly smooth against some that are lower resolution. So these are all things that influence, how your picture looks.
Anyone else? All right, well, thank you everybody for the time and listening.
Thank you.
Good question.